Thank you, Rochley. Our last speaker is Lwanga from the Nelson Mandela University. Lawrence is a fourth-year Bachelor of Law student. He is also chairperson of the Black Lawyers Association in that university. So the lawyer will speak last.
I will begin by saying all protocol observed out of a deep fear of saying Molweni guys. My name is Lwanga, as previously stated, and I hail from the Eastern Cape, and I'm also a proud member or a proud student at the Nelson Mandela University. Today I'm going to talk about two things. So firstly, I'm going to give a context of my experience here, and then secondly, I'm going to speak about students, and then I'm going to sit down and hopefully you will clap. So firstly, in terms of context, my first observation is that there is a lot of truth in big data. There is a lot of truth in trend analysis, and it allows us to gauge powerfully what we have to do. But what we do with this data is largely informed by the questions we ask. And that was my first observation of the entire conference. Ladies and gentlemen, you are asking the right questions. Secondly, the problems we face at university are intertwined with a long history. A history that we often term as colonialism and apartheid. But yesterday, Mr. Rapson termed it in a way that shook my spine. And he described it as an evil white supremacy. This description gave me a reality check and further reminded me of why gatherings like this are so important. They're important because universities at their inception were sites of conquest. And gatherings like this aspire to undo that kind of harm. Secondly, as Prof. Bao categorically stated yesterday, conferences like this get to the root of institutional culture and take out a big stick to beat the harbored sentiments that stem from our dark past. Because these very same institutions are the institutions where the same people who felt the detriments of these effects now exist, hope, dream, sometimes pass out on a Friday, and attain degrees. In her address, Elder Karen Stout stated that she went to the Apartheid Museum to view the historic deficits that occurred. Sometimes we don't need to go to the museum. We need to go to Alexander. We need to go to Soweto. We need to go to Motherwell, because apartheid still exists there. But the hopeful part is the very same people who come from there are now in these universities, and we must do our best in order to make sure that their dreams are validated. I would like to touch on two things. Firstly, the importance of university, and secondly, the importance of you in universities. A very quick summary or a very quick case in point. Apartheid was started at universities. At its inception, the ideas stem from a university. This scary reality tells you two things. One, the things that come out of university can alter history forever. And so if we bring good things out, history will be altered for the better forever. Secondly, we have a massive responsibility to make sure that all of the things that come out of universities are things that are going to better society. And my favorite part about this conference was the touching on social justice, because that is the only thing that is going to help us keep asking the right questions. But ladies and gentlemen, as hopeful as the conference was, we must understand that as a small bunch of people here, we are going to go back into these institutions and face big walls, tall walls, walls that make decisions, walls that make policy. But I'm not discouraged by the small number here, because oftentimes people who've changed the world have come in small packages. From the entire context I've given, I'd like to tell you one thing. Ladies and gentlemen, in isiXhosa we say ningapheli mandla, which means do not run out of strength. This job is thankless, but the correct thank you will come. History will remember the good work that you are doing here, and I encourage you not to stop. I will now talk about students. Something that you know a lot about, people that you once were, and to the school of life, something you will always be. Students, the most resilient, talented, brilliant, noodle-eating agents of change. Students, complex bodies, hungry bodies, young bodies, very creative, very passionate, the most beautiful stakeholders of this ecosystem and microcosm we call university. Of students, I would like to say this. Fees Must Fall fundamentally altered our psyche and our idea of belonging in these universities. It was a moment in history that we gathered the attention of the world and arrested the proceedings of the present day to allow us to be heard. The dips in the various aspects that have been suggested through the conference and in the many presentations hold very little in comparison to the benefits that will come in the future. History will absorb students because there has been no time in history where universities collectively, staff and students have been forced to flex their intellectual imagination, as in the couple of so months when the country was rattled by a bunch of change agents and not terrorists. They helped us question space, power, and the meaning of education as a public good. Fees Must Fall was a moment in history when the subaltern spoke, and it must be categorized as that. It helped us express a deep pain, a pain hundreds of years old, and institutions listened. They were grumpy, but they listened. I have the confidence to speak here today because of the courage I built from demonstrating and showing what matters to students. If you ever doubt that students want to be learned, remember that we held the university hostage for months on end out of a desire to know, to better ourselves, to better our communities, and to better our country. Much like you did not too long ago in the name of freedom. See, the short-term detriments that have come will be mitigated by the long-term benefits that will come from how much thinking we have all had to do because of this moment in history. The last thing I want to touch on before I conclude is something that speaks, or something that I found not to be prominent at this conference. And that was the plague, the emergency, the absolute problem that is sexual harassment at our universities. This is urgent. This is so urgent. In a presentation, I saw an impressive statistic, and a statistic that made me incredibly hopeful. It spoke to the fact that women consistently outperform men at university despite those hurdles. Imagine if we would collect data to solve that problem. How much better would society be? I believe that women performing at institutions of higher learning is an act of magic because a lot of policy is geared against them. And it is our responsibility as well-meaning people to make sure that this thing changes. And so to conclude, I tell you this, it was fun. It was a lot of fun, especially yesterday. Secondly, when everyone was taking pictures of the slides that were being presented, are you going to go back and actually look at them? This is just another question. And then as I'm about to sit down, I think maybe one day when I also have a PhD, I'll finally figure out what those juice things do. Is that cool drink? Is it? I don't know. But I would like to leave you with this. The words of Robert Sobukwe. We cannot leave the change of society to chance. We are the ones who want to build a new Africa, and only we can. And in his famous words again, he says, "You have seen by now what education means to us. An identification of ourselves with the masses. Education to us means a service to Africa. You have a mission. We all have a mission. A nation to build, we have a God to glorify, and a contribution to make clear towards the blessing of mankind. We must be the embodiment of our people's aspirations, and all we are required to do is show the light, and the masses will follow. You are brilliant people, and society will remember you kindly. I thank you so much."
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you. Is it not wonderful when you hear them speak like that? Indeed, it is. This This almost brings us to the end